Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Toppled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro pleads not guilty to narcotics charges in a Manhattan federal court. He declares his innocence and says he is still president before the judge cuts him off. Venezuelan opposition leader Marina Corina Machado says she has not spoken to President Donald Trump since October 2025. In a Fox News interview, she says she plans to return to Venezuela as she continues to be seen as a key alternative to Maduro. Israel's foreign minister arrives in Somaliland in the first high-profile visit since Israel recognized the breakaway region. He is received by senior officials in Hargeisa and holds meetings with the Somaliland leadership. Ukraine's allies gather in Paris to finalize security guarantees to reassure Kyiv in the event of a ceasefire with Russia. President Zelensky joins more than 27 leaders and senior US negotiators as they work on a joint position for the future talks. Activists say at least 35 people are killed and over 1,200 detained as protests continue across Iran with no sign of stopping. Reports say unrest has spread nationwide as authorities and security forces also report injuries amid rising tensions. China says it is strengthening controls on dual-use exports to Japan as tensions rise between the two countries. The Commerce Ministry says the new restrictions take effect immediately. Israel launches artillery and helicopter attacks in southern Gaza, with officials saying a tent of displaced people is hit and 2 family members killed. Gaza health authorities say the death toll since the ceasefire began has now risen to at least 422. English manager Liam Rosenoir says he has agreed to become Chelsea FC's new manager. Speaking to the press, Rosenoir said it was an opportunity that he could not turn down. Now we start this hour in Europe, and the leaders of around 35 countries are meeting in the French capital of Paris to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine, a crucial component of any future peace deal to end Russia's full-scale invasion. French President Emmanuel Macron said in his New Year's speech that firm commitments are expected to be made towards protecting Ukraine against any further Russian aggression after any deal is brokered. Macron has said that during the meeting in Paris, many European states and allies will make concrete commitments to protect Ukraine and ensure a just and lasting peace on the European continent. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's advisor Jared Kushner are expected to take part in the summit. On the 3rd of January, European national security advisors had a meeting in Kyiv to discuss a potential peace plan for Ukraine. After those talks, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine is preparing for both the possibility of a peace deal and the need to continue defending the country against Russian aggression. Here is what is on the agenda for the meeting. The discussion on the security guarantees will pick up on the joint statement released by a group of European leaders after a meeting in Berlin last month. The leaders will focus on long-term commitments for Ukraine aimed at preventing Russia from any attack or invasion in the future. Joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow, a Russian affairs expert. He joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Doctorow, here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to speak to you. A huge meeting today in Paris. Does this signal significance on the road to peace?
It's a gathering of losers. The situation is quite bizarre, and it's amazing that they persist in promoting the notion that they will arrive at a peace plan that will regulate and put an end to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. They're speaking to one side only. The Russians are not there. They can negotiate all they like among themselves and with Ukraine, but that is not a peace. That is just a negotiating position which the Russians have completely rejected, because the last plan, this 20-point plan of Mr. Zelensky, amounts to a Russian capitulation. Winning sides in conflicts, which the onlookers have since 3 years said will be decided on the field of battle, those onlookers have nothing to say when the opposite side, the Russian side, have won on the field of battle. So this is a big waste of everybody's time.
If Russia, of course, insists it does want peace, why does it oppose long-term security guarantees for Ukraine that are specifically designed to prevent these future wars?
It's specifically designed to create future wars. This is phony language. This is Orwellian language, where war is peace and peace is war. They are warriors. They are not peacemakers. And anybody who misunderstands that shouldn't be paying attention to this whole issue of the Russians want a peace that addresses the root causes. Mr. Zelensky and his backers want to prepare for the next round. And anything they say to the contrary is absolute lie. There's no need for peacekeepers if the issues are solved and there's no basis for future conflict. It is precisely to avoid addressing the root causes that meetings like the present one are taking place.
Doctor, of course, in the past, Vladimir Putin has turned down a direct meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, which would have been mediated by Donald Trump. Of course, there has been multiple meetings directly between the two sides, but only minor prisoner swap agreements have come out of them. Are you saying that only real progress can be made whenever there is a direct, high-level meeting between the two parties? Because of course, the Russians have only been in the room with the United States when it comes to these negotiations as well.
There will be no meeting with Mr. Zelensky, whom the Russians rightfully do not recognize as a legitimate ruler of Ukraine. It is 1.5 years since his constitutional mandate expired, and he has prohibited elections. So there is nobody to meet with. This is an empty issue. The Russians are the losing side normally, and in this case, for sure, will not dictate the terms to the winning side. And that is what Mr. Zelensky's efforts, that is what the coalition of the willing are trying to disguise. The further point, I will be surprised, almost amazed, if the Russians return to these talks after what has happened this last weekend. The United States has just demonstrated by its vicious attack on Venezuela in a contradiction to all of the terms of the UN Charter, that it is a war-making country and that it only understands force, that it is not capable of negotiating, let alone adhering to settlements or commitments to other countries. Therefore, and top of it all, the high likelihood that the United States programmed Ukrainian missiles that were directed a week ago at Mr. Putin's residence in the countryside where his wife and 3 children live. This makes the notion of Trump having some role in this peace absurd in the extreme.
Of course, under international law, did Russia not violate Article 2 of the UN Charter by using force against Ukraine in that matter, in that case? And what legal basis does Moscow expect the world to now simply trust in a peace agreement here?
Might makes right. Mr. Trump has reminded us of all of that. And to speak in any respect of Russia violating international law in the present context is again a violation of logic. The people who are saying that Russia violated the law are backing the United States in violating the law in the most egregious manner by kidnapping Mr. Maduro. They have no moral right and no legal right to raise their voices. So
Okay.
I think the game is up. The war will be ended on the battlefield as the EU's foreign minister 3 years ago demanded, in the false expectation, or the wrong-headed expectation, that the Ukrainians with Western support would win on the battlefield. Instead, they lost on the battlefield.
Okay.
Game is up.
Gilbert Doctorow, stay with us as we move on and over to the Middle East for our next story. And Israel has launched strikes against targets in Lebanon, focusing on Hezbollah and Hamas sites in 4 different villages. Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun condemned the attacks, warning they undermine efforts to prevent escalation. Footage released by the Israeli army shows damage to homes and military structures, including the complete destruction of a house in Al-Manara. Families fled to the areas amid drone activity, with ambulances and fire trucks on standby. Despite a year-old ceasefire, Israel continues regular strikes, with over 350 people killed since the agreement. Lebanon's army is expected to disarm completely south of the Litani River, while a ceasefire monitoring committee meets this week to review the progress. Listen into what the citizen of the area that has been struck by Israel within the past 24 hours had to say.
معمل حلفة معمل شو اسمه هون حلاوة ما في شيء خيي نحن بنعرف صرنا 50 سنة بمدينة صناعية ربينا هون ما فيها شيء صناعية لك كل واحد فوت على الصناعية بنعرفه مين هو ومنين جاي.
Gilbert Doctorow joins us once again. Gilbert, how does Israel justify striking so many targets in Lebanese territory, despite this ceasefire that's over a year old, killing upwards of nearly 400 people, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry figures, since the ceasefire has been in place?
I wouldn't spend time parsing the words of Israeli spokespeople. They are lying through their teeth. They have been for the last 2 years in every aspect of the war in the region that they have been waging, whether it is against Syria, whether it's against Lebanon, as you're speaking now, whether it was a genocide in Gaza, which is not yet terminated. The Israeli sources are utterly lying and cannot be taken seriously. All of this comes together. Mr. Trump has enabled this with military aid, with supplies to Israel that have made it possible to do what you are describing now. So the United States is in the situation up to its neck. And anyone who wants to pardon Mr. Trump in this is making a terrible mistake. Is it because Trump is behaving like a Hitler of our days?
And Gilbert, of course, evidence is something that hasn't been produced when it comes to the building of infrastructure by the Israeli military. Do you think they'll produce this? Of course, we can see visuals of the strikes taking place. We know how many people have died so far. Do you think Israel will indeed provide evidence that's required?
No, they won't. And they'll say they're studying it and they're producing reports. But that is just to keep the reporters like yourselves at bay. They have no intention of stating their real objectives of subjugating the entire region with the assistance that they're receiving from Mr. Trump. And the violation of sovereignty of the whole neighborhood of Israel is key to understanding what Trump has just done in Venezuela and saying he will do in Bolivia and probably will try again to do in Iran in the coming weeks or months. We are speaking about a might makes right policy that has now been officially adopted by the United States without any reservations or any sense of embarrassment. And that is the new world, which can be stopped. These aggressions can be stopped, not by demonstrations in the streets, about calling for the release of Maduro, but by the other world powers coordinating their response and making it clear to Washington that this is intolerable.
Dr. Doctorow, stay with us once again as we move on to our next story. And the United Nations has sharply criticized the US military operation in Venezuela, saying it undermined a fundamental principle of international law and violated the country's sovereignty. UN officials warned that unilateral force cannot ensure accountability for alleged human rights abuses and could worsen instability in the region. Meanwhile, tensions remain high in Caracas, where witnesses reported brief gunfire near the presidential palace. In Washington, House Speaker Mike Johnson emphasized that the US is not seeking regime change in Venezuela, but is aiming for a change in behavior. He also confirmed that American troops are not expected to deploy further, even as global scrutiny and criticism of the operation continues. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, have pleaded not guilty in New York to multiple criminal charges, with their next court appearance scheduled for March the 17th. Gilbert, Doctor, let's first start on the United Nations meet yesterday. Of course, we saw condemnations from around the Security Council hall, with the United States, Mike Waltz, the former National Security Advisor, displaying Americans' will with this operation. Wondering if you watched that yesterday and what you thought of what the Americans had to say at the United Nations Security Council.
Sad to say, I missed Waltz's presentation. But overall, this United Nations debate, which resulted in the condemnation of the United States for the violation of the Charter, that is all to the good. It will not by itself change anything, but it will provide an important legal justification for any action that major powers may take independently from the United Nations to persuade the United States to reverse course and return to civilized behavior. So it's a good first step. By itself, it accomplishes nothing, but it does provide a legal basis and a moral basis for what other powers may or may not do to rectify the crimes that have been committed this past weekend.
Yes, and of course, another point that has to be made, of course, Nicolas Maduro now faces a courtroom in New York City, just down the road from the UN. What's been your perspective on how the US has handled Maduro during his time in the United States? Of course, showcasing him to the world on Truth Social, dressing him in these overalls and of course paraded in front of the world. What's your analysis been on that?
This political theater has not just been invented last week. I go back to the United States' intervention in French politics. The United States doesn't just work in banana republics to have its will done. The United States has done the same exact thing, the same kind of behavior when dealing with major European politicians. I'm thinking now of Strauss-Kahn, who was the head of the IMF, I believe, and who was the leading candidate in France in presidential elections for the Socialist Party. And he was arrested in New York, and he was brought before justice in the same degrading manner, in chains. So that would be picked up on television coverage worldwide, and said he would have to abandon his campaign for the presidency in France. And that happened. And the result was an absolute non-entity. A fourth-rate man was elected as the president of France. His name was Hollande. So what is happening now in Venezuela, and with respect to Venezuela, is political theater that has already been staged and rehearsed years ago, in the last 15 years by the United States. And it is terrible theater. The only thing that's missing is a proper rebuke by the world audience.
Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now move on over to Europe for our next story, and the French Agricultural Union Coordination Rurale says it will take farmers' demands to Paris, whatever the cost, pushing ahead with protests and planned convoys after talks with the Prime Minister. This comes as anger grows over animal disease policy, environmental rules and foreign competition. The French government on Sunday revealed plans to tighten checks on food imports to respond to mounting protests from farmers concerned about unfair competition. Agriculture Minister Annie Genevard has announced that a new decree would suspend imports of certain products containing banned substances, ensuring all foreign goods comply with the same strict standards as locally produced food. Meanwhile, listen into what the president of the Coordination Rurale had to say on the protests.
De toute façon, à Paris, on y montera quoi qu'il en coûte. Voilà, on n'y va pas pour de la violence, on veut monter de façon pacifique et pour vraiment expliquer à nos parlementaires qui nous trahissent globalement tous depuis 40 ans.
We move on to some news from the sporting world now, and Liam Rose-Noir has been confirmed as Chelsea's head coach on a contract to 2032, describing the opportunity to replace Enzo Maresca at Stamford Bridge as one he could not turn down. Rose-Noir has left Strasbourg, Chelsea's partner club, after holding talks over the role. He has said at a Strasbourg press conference that he has had interest from many clubs, including the Champions League clubs, which has always been open with Mark Keller and the ownership. He has said that he will love the club for the rest of his life but cannot turn down Chelsea. After Maresca departed Stamford Bridge in circumstances last week, Rose-Noir immediately became the leading contender, but the move was held up by Blueco, the investment vehicle that owns Chelsea and Strasbourg, needing to be sensitive to the requirements of both clubs. Strasbourg are looking to finalise a new manager with Gary O'Neill in the running. Joining us now is Shekhar Vijayan, a freelance sports journalist, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Why do you think Chelsea has appointed Rose-Noir in these circumstances?
Thank you for having me over, Thomas. I think
Pleasure.
there are three crucial points here. One is, I think it's a strategic long-term investment. If you look at Chelsea, they've announced the appointment of Liam as a new head coach. And they've signed him for a long-term contract until 2032, which is signaling a major commitment to stability, long-term impact, and project continuity. It looks like the club wants to build a clear identity over several seasons rather than short-term fixes. I think that's one. The second thing is Liam has also got a proven track record and coaching philosophy, which is about attacking, which is about teamwork, which is about a different style of play altogether. He's been very successful at RC Strasbourg, maybe led the French side to qualification after almost 2 decades. He's also had a very eventful, a very interesting coaching journey at Hull City and Derby County. And he has got experience in building competitive teams with a strong competitive spirit, strong ethos, strong teamwork, where he knows how to make teams win. And I think the most important thing here is it's a very significant cultural moment and a broader impact in terms of, we all know that Ruud Gullit was one of the most relatively few black managers at the top, and now we've got Rosena coming in. So he becomes only the second black head coach in Chelsea's history, which is going to make such a big impact, and which will also inspire great diversity in elite coaching roles. So I think from a coaching philosophy, I think from the history of Chelsea, the way this is so interesting that we've got somebody like the gentleman coming, like Rosena coming in, making an impact because of his track record, because of his long-term impact, because of his coaching philosophy, and also because he wants to show the world that his style of play will really work. And it's shown with the teams which he has coached in the past, be it Hull City, be it Derby County, be it RC, Strasbourg. So his results speak for itself, and I'm sure with him coming into Chelsea, things might change automatically.
Yeah, and what do you think Rose-Noir will bring to Chelsea, and do you think he'll succeed?
yes, he will succeed because he brings a very different style of play. He's very attacking. He talks about teamwork. He talks about style of play. He's got proven experience in the past, and he's a person who's gone through quite a few failures to be victorious. So it'll be very interesting because Chelsea has got obviously there's a lot of history behind Chelsea, and Chelsea has got such a huge fan base. So this is going to be very interesting to watch how he plays this and how it's going to pan out. Also, I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's been a pleasure to have you on the programme. And for that's all we have time for. Keep watching the channel for more international updates